I'm here with Corpus Christi AFT President, Dr. Nancy Vera. Dr. Vera, welcome to the show.
Hi, Enrique. How are you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Awesome. Good to hear. I met Dr. Vera at a rally sponsored by AFT President Randy Weingarten in El Paso last month. You might recall we were there protesting the kidnapping of migrant children from their parents, and then we went to the detention center, internment camp basically, at Tornillo, the port of entry, where we attempted to leave some books and some toys, but we were turned away by immigration officials there. Dr. Vera,
Yes.
that's right. Dr. Vera, you've had a busy summer. Before we met in El Paso, you attended, you organized, as a matter of fact, a rally at home, didn't you?
Yes, we've been very active with the South Texas Human Rights Center as the Corpus Christi American Federation of Teachers and the Corpus Christi Coalition, Immigration Coalition. And one of the things that happened is that we found out that a charter school, which is opening up right in the middle of one of the highest poverty areas in our community, is affiliated with a program called Southwest Key. And Southwest Key owns or is a subsidiary of that charter school. They have those children detention centers. Their CEO makes like something ridiculous, like $1 million a year. Well, and his wife is employed there and gets $200,000 a year. But one of the things that's most disconcerting is that this detention center, these what I call Latino concentration camps for children, are opening up charter schools right here in our community, and they're beginning to take over, and they have abuse. They have a record of abuse of the children in their facilities. I think they've had like over 450 violations in terms of how they've been treating the children who are in their detention center. About 450.
That is
human rights violations.
Shameful. That's a shameful record. It reminds me of the waste, fraud, and abuse that's rampant in the for-profit charter industry nationwide. It's been documented not only in the Miami Herald, but in the Tampa Bay Times and in Salon.com. A number of magazines have run these articles, and still states like Texas, Florida, California continue opening charter schools at breakneck speeds. It's interesting, the connection between the for-profit charter industry and this, now the entire industry making a lot of money off detaining and actually kidnapping children from their parents.
Well, yeah, and this particular charter school calls themselves a public school nonprofit. But frankly, when the CEO makes over $1 million a year, don't tell me that it's not a nonprofit.
Yeah, how many?
And then they say, well, you know, this detention center, or what I call, like I said, Latino concentration camps for children. We know more about their culture. That's why it's a good thing that us as Latinos own this particular detention center. Well, I call that a farce. Yeah. And I'll tell you why. Children from all over South America, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, including Mexico, have different dialects when they speak. So why is it that they think that with just being a Latino, they can understand all of those dialects, or they can understand all of those cultures? Some of these folks are very different, and that's just an excuse that they use to promote their stupid charter schools and their concentration camps for Latinos. And the reason I say concentration camps for Latinos, Enrique, because you know that there are over 600,000 undocumented Europeans here in the country.
Good point.
And I don't see any concentration camps for them. I don't see any separation of families with them.
You're absolutely right.
It's just right here on the southern border.
In Miami right now, the Homestead base is actually hosting 1,200 children who've recently been separated from their parents. So this is going on nationwide, and in fact, recently it was disclosed that a nonprofit that works with the Education Secretary, Betsy DeVos, is actually hosting 81 children who have been taken from their parents. This connection goes
right
really
now,
deep, and it's really disconcerting for those of us who've been paying attention.
Of course it is. And for example, today, right now at this very moment, there are a group of people right now who are trying to unite a mother and her child. Her child is being held here in a detention camp in Corpus Christi, and we can't find the child.
Devastating.
And so she thought that the child was here at this place called Boken Camp, and he's not, or she's not. So I don't know what's going on with this mess. I think that the government has been lax, has been irresponsible,
Absolutely.
and has not done their due diligence. They think they're all that, but at the same time, they're not keeping track of our children.
I remember.
And when I say our children, it's because we're all human beings,
Absolutely.
and we all should care for the young.
Yep. I think the president came out and told the press that if he wanted to, he could reunite the parents in a day. And just this week, the Justice Department has requested an extension that the courts had given them to reunite the families. So apparently something is going wrong, and they admit that already over a dozen families have been lost, and they won't be able to be reunited with their children. They still have the children, they just don't know where the parents are. And this is completely unacceptable from an administration that's come in saying they promote accountability, and that was really what they came in on. To drain
There's
the
no
swamp,
accountability
basically.
here. There's no accountability. Come
None.
on, Enrique. We know that because, this president is doing whatever he wants to do, when he wants to do it, and how he wants to
Absolutely.
do it. And
Extra
there is no
constitutionally.
accountability for his actions.
Absolutely. Yeah, in fact, it seems that now some of the records were intentionally destroyed as soon as the families crossed into the United States, as if on purpose, that not to be able to reunite the families. This is all disturbing news. I wanted to ask you more specifically about your work with the South Texas Human Rights Center that you were talking about earlier.
Well, I received my doctorate in Latino leadership
Yes.
in Corpus Christi and educational leadership.
Thank you.
And from that point on, I based it on a local hero. His name is Dr. Hector P. Garcia. He founded the American GI Forum of the United States here in Corpus Christi. And by the way, Corpus Christi is the birthplace of the Latino Civil Rights Movement, or Mexican American
very
Civil
interesting.
Rights Movement, because here is where LULAC, the League of United Latin
Yes.
American Citizens, was born in 1929. And
I
then
didn't know
later,
that.
Dr. Hector founded the American GI Forum for veterans' rights and Latino rights.
Very interesting.
And as I was saying, when we have heroes like here in Dr. Hector P. Garcia was an immigrant, and I based my research on his work in desegregating Corpus Christi public schools, there was an issue with a veteran who came back from the war, and they refused to bury him in a cemetery because he was a Mexican American.
Wow.
So Dr. Hector helped everyone. He was a physician who did a wonderful job with human and civil rights. But so in that regard, I was very proud to do that because I learned about his philosophy and his perspective, and he would be appalled right now to know that our children, our little children, we're talking about 2 and 3-year-olds, Enrique,
Yeah.
are being separated from their families, probably never to see them again.
That's-
as far as I'm concerned, since they're not documenting where these children are going or where their parents are going.
Yeah, no. I keep hearing in the mainstream media how this is not who we are, and everyone is so shocked that this is happening in the United States, when actually the United States has a long history, centuries long, of separating children from their parents and then not reuniting them, in fact, profiting off this separation. So it's interesting that you should bring that up now, Dr. Garcia's work.
Yes, and it's very important because we have to look back to see how Latinos and just human beings were treated. Now it seems to be getting worse in the United States. I was said to you earlier, Enrique, that in an earlier conversation, that I feel like I'm a stranger in my own country, and I do, even though I'm a fourth generation Mexican American.
Okay.
Yeah, fourth generation Mexican American. My great grandmother was here in Corpus Christi, Texas, and even though I've been here, and I have my family and my friends have suffered discrimination, this is just way
beyond the pale. Yes, absolutely.
off the deep end. It's off the charts in terms of being inhumane. Now, granted, with the South Texas Human Rights Center, the role of the South Texas Human Rights Center is to help people who are crossing the border survive. Many times we provide water barrels for them, so when they're crossing the arid area where they are, and they can find some water so that they can survive. And unfortunately, sometimes some of our officials or some of our the people who are supposed to take care of us,
immigration officials,
go ahead and destroy the water
barrels.
barrels, or destroy take the water out of the water barrels.
There's
so
video of this actually happening. That the
so
border
that human
patrol
beings
is emptying caches of water and destroying blankets and food that's left for these migrants who are crossing really some of the most perilous terrain in North America to get here, including children. And their excuse is that they say that these migrants, it'll force them to come out more readily, when in fact they want to be found. They're coming here to seek asylum from the conditions that we are actually causing in their home countries. So this behavior could be murder. Hundreds of people have died in this crossing.
Well, actually, according to some figures, we have thousands and thousands who have died, but the government isn't keeping records of the people who died.
Because they're not people?
And that is why the South Texas Human Rights Center exists, as well as other organizations, because what we do is we try to match the remains, and we identify the DNA, and then we try to keep that on a database, so that somehow we can unite the remains with the families. But otherwise, it's as though people are dying and they were never really here, that they were never really alive. They are not acknowledged. They're not treated with human dignity even after their death.
And their deaths are not investigated as if they're not human beings.
No.
In fact, that there's just like some coyote, the remains of some coyote that they found.
Yeah, it's just a matter of human decency, a matter of human rights.
It is.
It's their birthright to be able to go from one border to across a border. We migrate as human beings too.
There's some confusion.
Just like the birds do, just like the monarch butterflies do.
There's some confusion on the right as to rights of citizens, and then there's certain rights that residents get. But what they forget is that human beings, just because they are in our country, they also have rights, and their children have very special rights. Their children have rights to education and healthcare, regardless of whether they're here legally or not. And many people don't realize that.
Correct. That's right, and we were at the forefront of that with Eleanor Roosevelt and her Declaration of Human Rights, Enrique.
Thank you.
And the thing about it is too, when we look at all of these people who are dying, seeking a better life, from torture, from being maimed, from being raped, we as a nation should have some compassion. It just bothers me so when other people think it's a joke, or when they call them illegals.
Let's clarify that.
I was
really quick.
once in a conversation with a person who was saying no one should break the law, blah 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 blah.
No, what?
And I said to that person, "You mean to tell me you have never been speeding down the road?"
There you go.
I said, "Yes, you have." You mean to tell me you've never parked in an unauthorized location? Tell me, what is the difference between one law and the next, or you say they're breaking a law? You didn't have an urgency in passing that red light or passing that stop sign or parking in an inappropriate parking
Right. A
space.
misdemeanor, mind you.
These,
And human beings
Right.
are not illegal. Let's just clarify that once and for all.
No,
Acts
they are not illegal.
Deeds are illegal. Actions can be illegal. Human beings are human beings, and all human beings deserve to be treated as such.
you know, I agree with that totally, Enrique. They should be treated as such. But when we have
It's
babies,
racism 101.
when we have babies,
I'm sorry to speak over you. I'm sorry.
what?
It's racism 101. First, you dehumanize a marginalized minority, that you make them seem less than by using this kind of language, saying they're illegal. A human being is not illegal.
It is nothing but racism. It's oppression of a certain group.
Thank you.
You know, the other day, we were here in Corpus Christi, and Corpus Christi is along the coast south of Houston. It's about 4.5 hours south
Right.
of Houston on the coast. It's a beautiful city. But here, and the majority of us here, 75% in this area to 80% are Latinos.
Wow.
Mostly Mexican Americans.
Wow, I didn't realize.
And yeah, and so what happened was they were doing a sticker check to ensure that our stickers were up to date on our vehicles. And then the police started asking if we were U.S. citizens. What in the world is going on
That
here?
is so inappropriate for local officials to be asking, enforcing federal laws. Municipalities don't get funded for those actions. In fact, they don't even get reimbursement from the federal agencies for those. That's what we have other agencies for those actions.
That's right. And I'm really growing sick and tired of it. But, you know, and I'm trying to think, what can I do? How can I impact change? And the scary part about it is that I don't know what else to do except to speak up and speak up out
That's it.
and go out to vote. The other day I went to, in fact, I was leaving for D.C. For a training, and I met my college professor there, one of my college professors at the airport, and I asked her how she was doing. Her name is Dr. Guerra, and she was talking to me about how awful everything is with the separation of families and how we're treating each other and how racism is just all over. It's just ubiquitous in this country. And she said, Nancy, for the first time, I'm so afraid that on this trip, I made sure to carry my birth certificate because I was not sure if they were going to say that I wasn't a U.S. citizen. And I said, that's just incredible,
That is,
Dr. Guerra.
Yeah.
And I said, but she wholeheartedly supports efforts to stop the separation of families. She's a great lady. And, you know, if intellectuals know that we need to do something or that they are fearful that they're going to be asked if they're a citizen or not, what is left for those of us who are here just trying to live a good and prosperous life? I mean, what's their due?
Right. So
What are we supposed
I think
to
you
do,
hit on
Enrique?
it. I think it's really important that we continue speaking out to our families and our friends and even our colleagues. For a long time, religion and politics have been out of bounds, that you don't talk about that with your colleagues at work. And I think the time to change that kind of thinking is long gone. The partisan politics has pretty much taken over our political system, and we really need to stop talking to each other as if we're enemies, because we're all Americans here and we all want what's good for our country. Maybe we see things differently, but that doesn't mean that we're opposed to each other, that we're enemies. That we need to learn how to communicate more effectively.
Absolutely. You know, and as teachers, as educators, we oftentimes think that what we do in our classroom is going to impact change no matter what, and we're good teachers. We go into the classroom, we make sure our lesson plans are done, we make sure we're prepared for our children, we have good relationships with our students, our parents, and our colleagues, our supervisors. But you know what? I'm saying right now, and I'm declaring, you are not a good teacher if you don't go out to vote and get involved in politics.
Done.
This myth about, oh, I don't like, or excuse, I should say, about, I don't like politics, we need to get over that as educators.
Nobody
Because you
likes
know
politics.
what? The moment we're born, Enrique,
Right.
politics affects us and impacts us. In the hospitals.
There's that saying that says,
Our birthright.
if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And I don't want to be on the menu anymore. I want to take part of the conversation here.
That's right. And so, in politics, the teachers have so much power. If we would just unite as one, there are millions of us.
3 million
And
teachers.
if we could just, what?
3 million teachers nationwide.
30 million teachers. We can control the destiny of our students and our children, and of course, education at a time when everything looks so impossible, looks so hopeless. Guess what? Teachers can have the upper hand. Teachers are the intellectual people who can move forward, who can go out to vote, who know to vote for the benefit of the children and our country. And we're not doing it. Because we say, well, we don't want to get involved in politics. That's poppycock.
Yeah, that's kind of lame. I'll tell you the truth. I don't think.
It is lame.
Can't think of. I think maybe emergency responders, maybe it's the firefighters more specifically, is the only profession that polls with more confidence than teachers. Teachers number 2 most confidence. Meanwhile, our politicians, Congress specifically, polls in at like 14% approval rating. I think cockroaches poll better than our politicians, and yet teachers are sitting around, sitting on their hands, basically allowing people who think nothing of treating children like a number or a profit, as teachers are just letting these people run education policy and the government, basically. And in democracy, it's really important that everyone get involved in whatever way, in whatever capacity we can find.
Well, and that's true, because DeVos, when she promotes charter schools, teachers should know that their salaries are either going to decrease or they're going to lose their jobs with the increase of charter schools. Or they're going to lose their rights. If they work for a charter school, they're not going to have, for example, in Texas, we have 30 minutes duty-free lunch, 45-minute conference periods, or any type of benefit. They can fire them on the spot because they are a private a charter school.
Yep. And each of them has to negotiate their salary independently without knowing what anyone else is making and without having any, let's face it, teachers aren't really good advocates for ourselves. We're extremely good when it comes to advocating for the rights of our children, but when it comes to our own rights, we're not really good at that. And imagine if every one of us, at the end of the year, we would have to renegotiate our own salary. That would be a really difficult. I can't imagine anyone who has to run their entire household on a teacher's salary, how that would work out for them.
Well, I know we've had heroes, we've had teachers fall in front of gunmen who are trying to shoot our children in our public schools. But you know what? For the majority of teachers, we're not doing a good job of advocating for our children. You know why, Enrique? I'm going to push back a little bit.
Go ahead.
Because we're not going out to vote.
Yeah.
We're not going out to vote.
Yeah.
If we really cared about our children, we'd promulgate change by going out to vote,
right.
by getting involved, by learning about the candidates who are running.
Exactly. Being informed.
My goodness, what is it going to take?
The primaries, just as important as any other general election. Primaries in many districts are what decide who goes to Washington and represents you and your interests. So it's really important that we get involved in our primary elections, and just like you said, informing ourselves of the candidates, their positions, not just what they're saying, but their history, their record. What have they actually been doing? And many of them are taking contributions from institutions whose bottom line is a profit, and they don't really care whether the children are actually learning or not.
Right, and take for example our city council. They are looking at budget cuts, and the first thing they wanted to cut were libraries in our community.
Because nobody reads, right?
And
nobody needs
I
a book.
thought to And I thought, wait a second, we have this great person, Dr. Isabella Raiza, who is picking up petitions, and she's got her young daughter even picking up petitions to keep that from happening.
No,
but
absolutely.
why is that happening?
Yeah, no, local libraries,
Why?
public
And
libraries
yet
are
they're
actually...
giving the corporations here in Corpus Christi tax relief. They don't have to pay a certain amount of taxes, but even though we need them for our libraries, even though we need them for our parks, they're closing parks left and right in Corpus Christi. And they're even, the city used to pay for crossing guards for our children. And now they said, we're not going to do this anymore. This is the jurisdiction of the school district. So the school district now has to incur over $250,000 for a crossing guard program. And how does that help our children?
That's a lot for a
How
small
does it help our children when we give these folks all these tax relief, and we don't have enough to survive on?
No.
Yet, we don't get any tax relief. We don't get any help in the classroom.
No.
We're trying to do with here in Texas with unfunded mandates by our governor, who has so far been silent about the separation of families. He may have made a statement, but he has done absolutely nothing to care for the immigrant families and the children here in Texas.
I was going to just clarify a little something that I said earlier, that actually public libraries are experiencing record attendance, and whether it's in a hard copy or in an actual printed book, or even in online materials, that children and families who don't have access to internet at home, they go to their public library, and that's where they get their internet access. And there's a lot of, especially during the summer, programs where they feed poor children, because when the school is out, they have nowhere else to turn to. That's usually where the public library steps in, and they provide a lot of wraparound services that the public might not be aware of, or maybe they're just not informed. But public libraries are a cornerstone of a functioning democracy, and it's really important that we continue funding those. Thank you for pointing that out.
And let's not forget our senior citizens who need access also, and are on fixed incomes and don't have any other way to access the internet.
Of course. Mm-hmm. So
I don't know if our government is working for the citizens or if it's working just for corporations. It seems as though, Enrique, they're working for corporations, for the mighty greenback, and leaving us behind.
Well, I'm at least a little bit encouraged by the recent pushback by more progressive candidates, more specifically within the Democratic Party itself, that the more liberal, more progressive candidates have been winning lately. Most recently, Alexandria, what's her name, Ocasio, in the Bronx, that she pulled pretty much one of the most powerful men, one of the most powerful Democrats in the House. She pulled him down. That was really amazing. That's part of this new wave of progressives that's coming in. But I've seen this going around the country. In Texas, have you noticed any of that action going on?
Well, we've heard a little bit of it. I think that when we're talking about those types of things, and we're talking about, we need to be very much aware that our government just isn't listening, Enrique. So, but I think there's hope. I think with people like you, Enrique, and what you're doing with this program, and thank you for inviting me on.
Oh, of course, thank you for coming.
And I think there's hope with those new progressives who are being voted in. And progressives means human rights, right, Enrique?
Absolutely.
We're for human rights and civil rights. I believe in the spirit of this country. I think right now everyone is down. I know inflation is going up. I read an article just this morning that it's a good thing for inflation to go up, but that just because that's a good thing for the country overall. But for those of us who are middle who are middle income people or
Right.
who are poverty stricken, that just means that everything is costing us
Right.
more. So our dollar won't buy what it used to
Exactly.
buy a year ago or 2
Right.
years ago.
Public
So,
sector workers
I think that
we're the ones who take the cut every time inflation goes up, because our salaries have pretty much been stagnant for several decades now. In fact, we've been losing on several fronts, including benefits that have been going down since the height, I think, in the late 70s, when public sector unions were much stronger than they are now, most recently with the Janus ruling here. AFT and NEA are pushing back and saying that's going to backfire on the conservatives who launched this campaign against public sector workers. And it just made us all that much more determined to bring workers' rights to the forefront of government policy.
That's absolutely right. This Janus decision was another attempt to destroy unions, to destroy the middle class, to
Well-funded.
destroy civil rights and human rights,
Very organized.
because that's what these organizations that you mentioned, the NEA, the AFT, and the AFL-CIO, that's what we strive for, is to bring a better life for everyone. But apparently, a better life right now in the United States means just those people who are in corporate America, just those people who are making millions of dollars off the backs of taxpayers
Absolutely.
and off the backs of our children.
Yeah, that multi-trillion-dollar tax cut that was pushed on the American people with the promises of getting $4,000 back per household. Actually, that hasn't really panned out as the president promised.
Well-
That the corporations, instead of raising wages, they decided to buy back their stocks. Surprise!
These people take us for fools, but I hope that in November they're going to be the ones who will be eating crow and will be the ones who are looked at as
Thank you.
fools, because that's not what the United States and democracy is about, Enrique.
Yep. I agree with you, and I have a lot of hope for this, for not just November, but for the near future, that more people are getting involved, especially the youth, with the March for Our Lives. They're doing a nationwide tour, signing up young voters. I think that's really important to get them involved as well, because they're the ones who have the most to lose. They're the ones who've been most affected by the stagnation in wages and these corporate buybacks of their own stocks. I just want to, before we leave, I want to make sure that everyone gets the website for South Texas Human Rights Center. I believe it's southtexashumanrights.org. Is that right?
That's correct.
South
And we're also on
SouthTexasHumanRights.org. You can find that in the description section of this video. Any parting thoughts, Nancy?
Well, as far as our children or our students being active, I applaud that. I'm so proud of them. I hope that all these millions of people who have been out protesting will turn around and make every effort to go out and vote for people who care about other human beings.
Absolutely.
Let's not be fooled. Let's not be fooled by this farce of an administration that we have now. It's all for themselves, not for the people of the United States.
Right. That
That's all I have to say, Enrique.
Yeah, I read a quote. A friend of mine said it to me. I wish that I had it in front of me. It goes something like that: when the machine becomes unfair and unjust, it becomes our moral obligation to lay our bodies and use them to jam the machine. And I've seen that across the country, as hundreds, in fact, almost 600 activists arrested in D.C. in the Senate, one of the Senate buildings there last month, protesting. This is really an amazing time to be an American, and I strongly encourage everyone who's watching to call on your family and your friends, your people who attend your church, your colleagues, and tell them how important it is to get involved at this time. Corpus Christi AFT President, Dr. Nancy Vera, it has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Enrique. It's just a wonderful thing to have met you in Tornillo and El
Likewise.
Paso.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I'm certainly very grateful for everything that you do.
Me too. Thank you. If you found the information in this video helpful, share it with a friend, and don't forget to click on the subscribe button.